Okay, good morning here in Baja, California, sir. Our compost pile, I think we started this end of October, early November. We've been adding kind of weekly to it, usually about a bucket about this size. Um, you know, we talk about layering compost. I mean, you can do a batch compost where you do it all, and about this 3x3 kind of a pallet size is fairly good. Um, what what I think is nice, the layering can work. What I notice is that like the nitrogenous material, the greens, tend to promote flies and stuff like that. So we had tons of flies in the house today, which hasn't been a problem all season, and I realized my family didn't know how to do the compost. So I thought I'd come out here and show you before I actually do it appropriately. So like there's a lot of food just kind of sitting there on the surface, and there's tons of flies there. So if you don't do compost correctly, you're going to end up with flies, and it potentially is going to smell much worse. So basically, I mean, you want to mix the stuff, but even if you don't want to turn it, what you can do is kind of create a little bit of a hole. So you just pull out kind of your dry material, and you're getting a hole where you can set the next load of compost. So here we've got a nice little hole, and then I'll dump my compost in there, and then I'm always going to add, so like some of this stuff, it's like I'm going to pull, well, that shouldn't have gone in either. I'm going to pull this, get it down in the hole, and then I can either use the old stuff, or I usually put on a fresh layer of yard trimmings and alfalfa. So what I try and do is get a lot of that into the middle and make sure it's covered very well with the browns, with the dry. And we use both a straw and some of the cuttings from around the property, like both weeds and leaves and stuff like that. So making sure we're keeping all the organic matter on site. So what I do is I basically dig this hole in the middle, and as you can see, there's some composting material there. So this is very nitrogenous in the middle. And this is starting to, when I open this hole up, this is probably the third or fourth time I've opened the hole up, and I can really smell this time. So I think what I need to do is mix more brown into there. So it's like, you only want to do this technique like once or twice, and then you want to give it a proper turn. So it's like this is getting ready for actually having a proper turn, really incorporating the brown and the green. But this is a great technique, I think, where you just pour all of your material right into a hole, and rather than doing the work of turning it every time, basically what I'm trying to do is create that heat in the center of the pile, and the nitrogen is going to create more heat, and then I'm going to use that to burn through some of this carbon. So I mean, and it's less work for me. And this is effective microorganisms. This is you can see kind of the life kind of coming, the bubbles. That means the microbiology is eating the molasses. We open this up. It smells sweet and sour. This is a little sweet. It still smells a little molassesy, so it's like there's still some biological activity that can happen, but basically this is good. It's got some microbiology life in there. What I'll do is I'll moisten the compost, and this is going to help break everything down. Now I'll refill this with a little more molasses and water. Let the remaining microbiology repopulate the thing. I do this every month. I pour it in my hugel cultures, I pour it on my compost, and then we've got some yard trimmings here, and I'm going to cover with some of that, some of the leaves and herbs from around. Those aren't quite as dry as this alfalfa, so I think this time particularly I want to make sure we cover it well, because I don't want the flies coming. I can keep the flies down on the property and stuff like that, just by simply making sure that there's not a lot of nitrogen available at the surface, because they can't burrow through all this brown material to find stuff. So they'll only find it when it's more available, more surface oriented. So we're basically just hiding this from the flies, which is my number one thing. I mean, for me, the only real challenge with compost is the flies. The odor can be interesting sometimes, but again, I'd say the same mitigation strategy works for the odor as the flies, which is just slow the process down. Like, the reason stuff smells is if you have too much nitrogen trying to decay too quickly. If you can slow it down to the point where there's too much carbon, then basically it's certainly not going to smell, and it's certainly not going to attract much flies. The only trade-off is that it's going to take significantly longer at that point, because it's like, if it's all carbon, it's basically what you're doing is you're letting trees mulch their leaves underneath the tree and just create soil on that, like, year-long, 2-year-long, 3-year-long process, as opposed to like on a 2-month-long process where you can make a batch of compost because you're burning all that carbon more quickly with the nitrogen heat, with that rich and that nitrogen can come from, you know, urine, from animal manure, you know, definitely piss on the compost if that's part of, you know, what you can do. Like, it's just like, you know, I've been seeing people make like straw bales, PP ponics, where it's like, you know, they're reusing the urine from us as like a nitrogen input rather than, you know, harvesting nitrogen. Then we always wet it. So I'll clean out my bucket and I'll wet this for a couple of minutes as part of the composting process. And that's about it. So each time I do this, it's like the compost looks higher and higher, and then when I get back, it always just has gone down by, like, you know, 6 inches or a foot. You know, I feel like we've been almost to the top a couple times, and then it just keeps falling, which is good. It's just, you know, creating soil, and there's good microbial activity in there. Sometimes I add my EM. I forgot to bring that over this morning, but, you know, I feel like it's pretty rich with microbial activity. Feel like it's doing a good job composting. I can see soil in the middle. I do want to give it a solid turn next time when I've got some time and the energy to really incorporate those browns and greens together. Very cool.